I'm author and critic David Agranoff. I'm a horror and science fiction author, critic, and researcher. In this podcast, I wanted to provide in-depth interviews and panel discussions with everyone from New York Times bestselling authors to researchers, musicians, and anyone I find interesting. Welcome to Postcards from a Dying World. Hello and welcome to another special episode of Postcards from a Dying World. This is episode 198. So we're coming up on 200 and I've got, it's already recorded, but I recorded it at the 100th anniversary of Amazing Stories event here in San Diego. So look forward to that, including guests Jonathan Mayberry and Philip Fracassi on that episode. So that's a big one, but that's actually not the ad reads, Eric, I got to do. But Eric is going to be patient enough to sit through two real quick ad reads I got to do, one of which is the Philip K. Dick Festival. That's the reason why you haven't gotten a lot of episodes lately, because I've been working my butt off on the Philip K. Dick Festival coming up at Cal State Fullerton here in Southern California, August 20th through the 23rd, with special guests of honor, Tim Powers, Sarah Langan, and Brian Evanson. And we're going to have 3 days of questioning reality and talking about weird science fiction. But it all culminates in we're going to take a tour of all the sites where Philip K. Dick lived and wrote about in Orange County. So you don't want to miss that if you're a PKD dude or a person of any kind, excuse me. And but the one other thing I have to start, this is the first time I'm going to talk about it, but this podcast and Dickhead's got a sponsorship, and that is for the Dwarf Lab Dwarf Mini Telescope. It's smaller than a Stephen King paperback. You can put this in your back pocket. You can bike it places. That's what I do. And with this little camera, you can take pictures. I took, for example, this picture of a pinwheel galaxy from 23 million light years away. And more impressive is this one I took of the Lagoon Nebula. And so listen, if you want to do astronomical photography or have a cheap telescope, this is only $400. And you can take pictures of the galaxy, the universe. Like, it's amazing. And Dwarf Labs is a sponsor of this podcast. They were kind enough to send me one of these, and I've been going nuts doing that astronomical photography. And so if you live anywhere with dark skies, you can also like put it in your backyard and set it to take a 4-hour photo of another galaxy while you go and watch 2 movies, and it will sit there and take pictures. So it's really amazing. Like I said, look at it. Super small. It's honestly weighs less than the paperback of it. So like this is an amazing product. And so just want to shout out Dwarf Labs. With that out of the way, Eric LaRocca is here to talk about this amazing novel, but we're going to talk about his whole career. This is a long time coming. Eric is an author that I have appreciated for a long time, since things have gotten weird since we last spoke. Was the I believe that was your first book, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was my first like published novella.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been, and then I think you read Everything the Darkness Eats, which is my novel with Clash Books a few years ago.
Yeah. Those
So
are the two that I've read. And
yeah,
before this one. And what's funny is that yeah, I was really excited because my Clash book came out around the same time. So that was just, it was a really neat one, because I was like, hey, yeah, I'm connected to this writer.
oh
But
yeah, love that.
yeah, but also just that first novella, I mean, we'll get to that in a little bit, because I want to talk about your writer's journey. But um and one of the things I've always appreciated about you, Eric, because I do this with science fiction, but I really feel like you're very connected to the history of the genre as a reader.
Hmm.
and that you always honor the greats that you grew up reading. And when I see another writer who is passionate about that, that always warms my heart, because that's the way I feel about both horror and science fiction. But how did you become a horror reader, and where did that journey start?
Yeah, I mean, it started pretty young. I always just found myself really drawn to like the macabre and the unsettling, and I remember reading like The Monkey's Paw at a really, really young age, and a teacher at my elementary school kind of like snatching it from my hands and being like, "You shouldn't be reading this kind of stuff." And that was like one of the first moments where I was like, "Wow, like horror feels forbidden in this really exciting way. Like it feels kind of off limits in this way that is just really inspiring." And once you're told you can't do or read something, you obviously want to go out and savor all of that genre has to offer. So, my my tastes growing up were very much like in the Stephen King realm. I loved Stephen King. I loved Peter Straub, Michael McDowell, and then it was really encountering Clive Barker and his work that
Mhm.
really just opened my mind to like what the possibilities were for transgressive and erotic horror fiction. He was just such a pioneer and so just daring and audacious with his work, I felt like. And I discovered him later in his life, which is when he was openly gay.
Mhm.
Originally, he wasn't open to the public, but when I discovered him, he was an openly gay writer, and that was just really exciting to encounter somebody like that. And from reading his work, I feel like he was a doorway in a lot of ways because he really pushed me into more like raw transgressive writers. So like, writers like Poppy Z. Brite and Kathy Koja, and Dennis Cooper. These are all writers that really just write the most like unflinching portrayals of brutality and cruelty. And I just was so, so grateful to Clive for, being that doorway and being that conduit.
Mhm.
So I just, I kind of savored the entire genre. I started off with like the really kind of old school gothic, like Nathaniel Hawthorne and Edgar Allan Poe when I was young, and then kind of graduated to the more extreme transgressive body horror when
Mhm.
I got into high school and college. And yeah, I'm very reverent of the writers that came before in the genre. I mean, I grew up also reading like Edward Lee and Brian Keene and Wrath James White. So I feel like it's my honor and almost like an obligation to honor those writers who came before. And um, I was actually just thinking about this the other day because my partner and I were walking around Boston, and there's a giant Walgreens situated where this old Borders used to be.
Mhm.
And it kind of breaks my heart to think of like a beautiful store like Borders just going by the wayside, and now a pharmacy is in its place. But I remember going to that store in particular when I was on vacation visiting Boston with my parents when I was much younger, and I would see Edward Lee on the shelf, and I would see Brian Keene on the shelf. And um, I feel like some writers those things have like shifted over the years, and I wonder where Edward Lee is now on the shelf. And you
Mhm.
can find him in the used bookstores, but he's not on the shelves in Barnes and Noble anymore, and it disturbs me a little bit. So
Yeah.
those writers like Thomas Tessier, who wrote Finishing Touches and Rapture. Like I loved his work too, and I just feel like an obligation to shout out those creators who were here before me,
Yeah.
uh, and just honor them.
Yeah, I was trying to explain. I want to hang on Clive for a little bit, because I was trying to explain to a younger horror reader the importance of Clive Barker, and like the kind of thermonuclear detonation that was the Books of Blood, and the
Yeah.
combo of him being a director and doing Hellraiser. And certainly I was reading him before I understood a lot of what I was reading, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if but and and honestly, the first time I ever remember a gay character in anything
Hmm.
was in The City in the Hills. And
Yep.
um when I remember reading it as a kid and being confused at first because I was like, wait a second, hold on, wait, that's he's and then and then but not having but being progressive enough of a kid that I was like, okay, I see what's happening here. um and then, you know, i had this I had a really funny experience. My father was a political scientist and an academic, so he was pretty forward thinking. But when I was in seventh grade when Hellraiser came out, and I was already reading Clive Barker. And my father had this philosophy that if you'll read it, I'll buy you anything, as long as
Hmm.
you prove to me that you read it. And so I had explained to him who Clive Barker was and tried to explain some of these stories to him, and he just kind of like, whatever. But he took me to see Hellraiser. And halfway through the movie, he leans over to me, and I was like, oh God, he's going to tell me we can't do this or whatever. And all he said was, your sister's taking you next time. He didn't say, no, you can't do this. You can't.
Yeah.
But I think the the way that Clive um kind of opened the door for and the thing about it was is what he wasn't out, but I think we all knew,
Yeah.
and I think I just I think Clive's role is very important, not just because he was he was just such a daring writer, and so strange too, because and for me it's like the body politic, the fact that he wrote a story about hands having a revolution.
So good. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, it's, it's really incredible. And then of course then there's your Poppies and your Kathy Kojas, and they're all doing really really important stuff. But I think Clive, and look, I'm sitting here at my desk underneath a Clive Barker signed poster. So like, you know, I the amount of respect I have for Clive Barker is immense. So I just wanted to share that with you. So I'm sorry if I talk for a long
No, no,
to
I
hear from
love
you.
any chance to talk about Clive with another Clive fan is an honor for me. I mean, he really did like change the game for everybody, I feel like, you know.
Yeah. And couldn't have been a sweeter guy. And I always tell that I went to a signing in Orange County where only four people showed up. And I was super like, when before he walked in, I was like kind of embarrassed for him. Like, there's only four people here. And then I was like, but then he showed up and he treated all four of us like we were royalty. And a year later, I saw him at StokerCon, and he remembered. He was like, "Hey, you were at Orange County," and he's like, "David, right?" And I was just blown away. Just,
Wow.
yeah, an amazing guy. And plus that experience of being there, of one of the four people, he just sat and talked to us for like an hour, just really intimate. And that, the monster that he drew in my copy of Inhuman Condition is really elaborate because he had the time too, and it was just really cool. So I love Clive, and I will.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
like very surprising that only four people showed up because from my vantage point, it seemed like he was always this like massive star, you
Well,
know.
yeah, I was shocked. I told my buddy, because it was in Orange County and we drove up from San Diego, and I told him we got to get there early because there's going to be a huge line. And this was for Abarat too. So, and, but yeah, it was very strange. Like, and then of course I went to a signing in LA another time, and there was 200 people there. And so like,
You never know.
you
Yeah.
never know. But what it taught me a lesson was like to I did my first book signing ever, one person showed up to it. And I was like, I remembered Clive being so gracious with four people, and I was like, I'm not going to be upset. This one person is, and by the
Yeah.
way, that one person and I are still very good friends. So
Aw.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
No,
a good thing. But
you have to be grateful, and I kind of approach that too. Like I've definitely had events where the turnout was not what I was hoping for, but I try to go into that room and just like be gracious and be grateful that people even showed up and bought a ticket, because it's expensive to go out now and like see an
yeah.
author and buy a hardcover book, and it's a whole night. So it's you should
Hmm.
definitely be grateful for people's time for sure.
For sure. So when did you make the jump from I'm a reader, but I want to be a writer? I want to like for I feel like for many of us that's just like instantaneous, like I want to create this feeling, right?
Yeah, it was instant for me. I mean, I have wanted to be a writer as long as I could hold a pencil. And I started drawing at a really young age. I just drew constantly, and then once I got into elementary school and started reading, I just really wanted to write stories and just create. And that's always been my it's like my vocation. It just feels like something I was just born to do. And my parents, thankfully, were extremely supportive at a very young age when I was growing up, and never never steered me in another direction. They saw immediately what kind of dark, disturbing content like I was interested in reading and writing and creating, and they never squashed it. They never attempted to like push me in a different direction, fearful that their son was some sort of like deviant or pervert. They really accepted me and really made me feel emboldened to chase what I was always interested in reading and writing about. And it was really my mom that kind of shaped my love of horror, because she introduced me to the old Universal classic monster movies when I was really young. So I was really obsessed with like Creature from the Black Lagoon and House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, The Wolfman. Like I just ate all of that stuff up completely. And I was a monster kid growing up. Like I just loved monsters, and
Hmm.
then as I got older, I really started to appreciate the fact that human monsters are a little bit more interesting to me, and like I'm just interested in the cruelty between two people, and the brutality between people, and that's what I really want to write about more than anything else.
Well, and certainly you've also kind of gotten a reputation for body horror and for being and the word transgressive always gets tied to your work. And it's interesting because one of the things that I always see when people talk about, I see often people like saying that they enjoy your books with a question mark,
Yeah.
right?
And I love
And
that. I love
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's because you're creating a feeling, and that's showing that the book is succeeding in a way that you're evoking a feeling or and and uh and yeah, my first experience reading that first novella of yours, and I read it, and shout out, he wanted me to say hello, my homie Anthony Trevino, who was the first person to hand me one of your, because he handed me your novella right after Sam put it out, and said, here, read this, it's fucked up.
Love it.
And for us to kind of have that seal of approval is a it's a funny thing too, because I get underrated for like everyone at 2014 World Horror in Portland. Everyone was shocked when I did the gross out contest, and I was like, hey, I grew up in this stuff too, okay?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I came in second, and I still think I was robbed,
Hell
but
yeah.
but nonetheless, like I grew up around this stuff, so I'm not easily disturbed. I was reading Poppy Brite and Clive Barker when I was in middle school, so I'm not
Yeah.
easily disturbed. And there have definitely been times where I've been reading your work and I've been like, okay,
Wincing. Like
yeah. What
yeah.
do you think that you know, like, is that something that comes natural, or do you strive for those moments? Because I always feel like it works best when it's just a part of the landscape that you're creating, because that's how it feels to me when I read one of your works.
I want it to be the landscape. I want it to be the language that I'm, using to convey this story. It feels very natural to me to write about
Yeah.
this kind of deviant monstrousness. I'm very, I go by instinct a lot when I'm writing. Like I will
Mhm.
outline a lot, but I do like to leave myself moments where I'm open to like the possibility of just like organic discovery. I mean, so much of writing is just like discovery,
Mhm.
and just like unearthing things about your character and even about yourself. Like I learned so much about myself by writing and creating these stories. And um I definitely have had moments where I'm writing and something has kind of come in that I didn't expect when I'm writing a scene. And I feel like those moments are so precious to me because if I'm able to shock and surprise myself, I figure, oh, I can do the same thing to a reader.
Mhm.
But I mean, I'm never really thinking too much about audience reaction when I'm writing my books. Like I write for me most of all. Like I write my interests, I write my obsessions, my fetishes, like all of those things. Like that's what I'm interested in writing is just for me and my own personal, being.
Well, and
Um,
that's what the people who like think they're writers because they're using AI or whatever. It's like the best moments in writing is not. I mean, it's cool to have to hold a book in your hand. It's cool to have the finished product, but that moment
it's about
where
the journey before that.
absolutely that moment where the spark hits you,
Yeah.
where you find something is that kind of oh shit moment when you're writing. I think
It's
is
the best. It's
yeah.
it's better it's better than anything else you could imagine. And I feel bad for those people who are subservient to AI and are utilizing it for the wrong things, like create in creative field, because you're robbing yourself of the joy of actually writing. And
Yeah.
like if you're gonna write, if you want to be a writer, you should write,
Yeah.
like
Well, the fact is it's a lot harder than people realize, and it's not for everyone,
it's not
and
for everyone.
it's not for
Exactly.
everyone, and that a lot of these people that want a shortcut, they you know, and it's funny because specifically, I'm working on a science fiction novel where I'm having to think a lot about how a computer would write. So I'm delving into these things a little bit more than I would like to.
Yeah, I feel you.
And it's funny because and trying to um think about these things, it's funny because like that specific moment of the of and I can see there's one that when we get to spoilers on We Are Always Tender with Our Dead, there's one that I feel like I felt when I was reading it that I felt your discovery. And that's a
Mhm.
thing that writers reading other writers
Yeah.
is a totally different experience than the average reader. And I have a coworker who's a big reader. Well, actually, she doesn't work with us anymore, but she used to work with us, and she's a big reader, and she wants to take the leap to start writing, and so she's always asking me for advice. And I told her to look for those moments where you can feel like what start to look for the moments where you can feel the writer like having that supernova in their head, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where they're creating, and I feel like that's an experience that writers can kind of share with each other when they're reading books, because and like one of the reasons why I think certain writers like succeed is because like take your Stephen Graham Jones for example. I'm just pulling
Mm,
one, or a Paul Tremblay, right?
totally.
Yeah, I feel like when I read their work, I can totally feel those moments sometimes, right? But I
Yeah.
felt that here. So as my great segue, and it's funny because you know and look, I admittedly I don't read as much horror as I used to. I've had to focus because of the podcast on a lot more science fiction lately. And so what was cool is that I had contacted Titan about something else, and they sent me this one. I didn't ask for it, right?
That's
It
great.
showed
They're
up in
doing
my
their
mail.
job.
Yeah, they did a good job. I pulled it out of the mailbox and I opened it and I was like, oh, hell yeah. I was very excited. And I was like,
Nice.
because, and I'm going to say this in my review too, about a week before this came in the mail, I was at Mysterious Galaxy and this was on the staff pick shelf.
Yeah.
And I picked it up and I said, I love how gothic this one looks.
Yeah.
And I was like, I am going to have to read that. And I feel like whoever the publicist at Titan, like somehow caught my wavelength. And so I know this sounds kind of woo woo, but I really do feel like this one came into my mailbox for a reason. And um, this one like hit me in a lot of ways because I'm a small town horror person. What are your influences on small town horror? Do you have a couple favorites? Because I feel like you're one of those writers where the influences are a part of the secret sauce.
Oh, totally. I mean, the big influence for this book is Michael McDowell's Blackwater
Mhm.
series, which was released in installments in the 1980s, but is one, you know, massive tome that Valancourt Books put out a few years ago. And from what I understand, Grady Hendrix told me like a little while ago that Blackwater has had a huge resurgence in like Spain of all places.
That's
And
that's odd.
it's like gone viral and like the publisher can't keep it in stock over in Spain. Like it's ridiculous. Like it's great. It's amazing because I feel like Michael McDowell is such an underrated, underappreciated writer.
Yeah.
So I look to his work for a lot. I do look to Stephen King for a lot of inspiration. Like I love his small town work in horror. Um, I dedicated the book to Brian Evanson, who is a dear friend of mine, but also like an incredible mentor and has done a lot to really shape my imagination and his kind of explorations of like paranoia and psychological dread and fear. Like
Mhm.
his work has really influenced me in a lot of ways.
Well, I say it all
Um,
the time. I think Brian's the best short story or author currently working.
Oh,
Like,
for sure, for
yeah,
sure. Yeah. He's like a genius. He's
yeah.
just like an absolute genius. And yeah, I'm just very influenced by his work. I'm very influenced by Mariana Enriquez. She's a big influence for me. I feel like she's also a really interesting short story writer. Like I love her full-length novel, Our Share of Night, but I really love her short story collections. There's another writer I really love from Ecuador. Her name is Maria Fernanda Ampuero, and she wrote a collection called Cockfight and a collection called Human Sacrifices, and both of them are so disturbing, so visceral, and unpleasant to read. But if you're into that kind of really raw, nasty work, I feel like you will absolutely vibe with what she
Mhm.
writes. Um, but that being all said, like my influences, like I mentioned, like those writers, those are huge influences. But I mean, I grew up in a very small, isolated rural town in Connecticut. So a lot of my views of this like small town bucolic sort of picturesque life is informed by that, but also like when I was growing up in that small town I felt like there was like a little layer of like unpleasantness kind of simmering just beneath the surface.
Mhm.
And it was in that small town that like I really like I came of age and I discovered my sexuality, my gender expression, and who I wanted to be. And not everyone was on board with that. And there was a lot of trauma there. There was a lot of like suffering, a lot of like needless cruelty. And that's kind of where I draw from my inspiration from living in that small little community. And yeah, I mean the whole series I feel like is informed by that in a lot of ways, just like how small towns can be like the steel trap get stuck in and can't really work yourself free from.
Hmm. Yeah, and I feel like this is a really it's really interesting because it is part one of a trilogy, right? So but to me it feels like a very, very solid piece of work. And I really like on its own, I feel like the atmosphere in it is like you had to nail the atmosphere to make this story work.
Yeah.
And I think it's funny because I think this book will appeal very much to writers. I think because the construction and the world building here is really interesting. And I want to say that because being that most of my scholarly endeavors these days are mostly built on science fiction right now, and I'm mostly reading a lot of science fiction, a lot of mid-century to earlier science fiction as well. So that creates this kind of headspace where I'm reading, where I'm in these worlds that don't exist. Because if you're talking about the future via the past, it becomes this whole other thing. And so, and I say this to say that I entered this town in New Hampshire reading this book, you know, kind of very attuned to how the world is built here, even though it's tangentially, it's not a far flung place. It is this very interesting community, and it's built so well through the eyes of Rupert.
Hmm.
So we're going to talk a little bit about Rupert, and I want to tell you that unintentionally, and because like one of the things that I study is Philip K. Dick's formula, I do a lecture on it. You happened upon with Rupert something that he teaches all the time, which is world building is best done through your subhuman or lower characters, because they teach you what is going on in the world. And it's not that Rupert is a subhuman, it's that he feels that he's a subhuman
Yeah.
in this city. And so one of the things that is so brilliant about this book is that we enter Burnt Sparrow entirely through Rupert's eyes. And part of his journey is that he starts off as this internally feeling subhuman. Does that make sense? Like I
No, totally. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, another kind of influence for the book was also like Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. So like
mm,
the teenager in that book, like kind of going through all of those just awfulness that he experiences throughout the story. I feel like I'm not as familiar with Philip K. Dick's work as I probably should be, but
that's okay.
I totally understand what you're saying, and I feel like that's such an accurate, like that's a really great piece of writing advice because it really does show you like the nuances and the complexities of the world that you're trying to illustrate.
Yeah, that's why the first chapter of all of his books, the character is either too broke to pay to open their door, or like Galactic Pod Healer, the character is too broke to turn off the ads in their dreams. They're always like put upon, because that teaches you the world. And
Right.
so, what was so great for me with Rupert is that immediately, especially his relationship with his father, becomes so much of setting the stage for our understanding of his place in this microcosm world, right?
Totally.
So let's give people a little baseline, spoiler free, of the plot, and then we'll go quickly into spoilers so we can just talk writing here. But
Yeah.
give people how do you pitch this book, because I know how I would, but
Yeah.
I didn't
I
write
mean,
it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, hey, even though I wrote it, like I'm not a great like salesman for this stuff, so I may not do it the best way, but I mean, how I usually have been pitching it, I describe Burnt Sparrow, the first book in the trilogy, We Are Always Tender with Our Dead, is set in the early 2000s, and it centers around a very small, isolated community in the hills of New Hampshire, and it centers around a young teenage boy named Rupert who is tasked with his father to patrol the unburied corpses of a recent massacre that's occurred in town. And through this activity that he's doing, he kind of comes to all of his family dynamics and issues with his father, the death of his mother, everything kind of comes to a head, and his world becomes intertwined with another resident in town named Gladys Esherwood, who is the wife of a very successful, very wealthy nobleman in town. And the whole crux of the conflict comes from the fact that the massacre was perpetrated by three faceless entities who had arrived on Christmas Day to perform this just unforgivable act of brutality.
Mhm.
So it explores, like punishment versus the nature of the crime, and what thresholds are you willing to cross in your quest to find vengeance. The whole book is really about like thresholds and
Yeah.
crossing them or standing at them.
Well, and one of the things I love about it is that it balances the Southern Gothic feel with a feel of surrealness on the level of the town. Like when you watch Twin Peaks or something like Lynch, or even a lot of when I read PKD, a lot of the books take place in this tangential to reality kind of thing where
Yeah.
you kind of feel displaced,
Yep.
like consuming it. And what I think is cool is that there's a recognizable feeling of that New England Gothic, like kind of doing battle in your mind with the surreal otherworldliness at the same time. And that's one of the things that I think really works in this book. And is part of the world building of it. And that part of that is that Rupert and his dad have to uh guard these bodies, which is just a really weird thing, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
all the and one neat little trick that you pull in there that didn't go past me, but non writers might not notice, is that you never name his father. He's just his father,
Mhm.
like. And so you take great pains to not do that. And once I saw it, and then I was kind of looking for it, but like I really appreciated that. So
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I wanted this to feel like a tangential kind of reality, like very Lynchian, very like it's taking place in our world, but also like removed slightly, you
yeah.
know?
Oh yeah, absolutely pulled it off. So um on that note, yeah, we've talked for 40 minutes already. So let's before we go to spoilers, if there's anything you wanted to, because some people will go buy this book and come back a long time from now, is there anything you want to point people to, like upcoming? I mean, book two is coming out soon, so they can launch one into two pretty quickly. But what do you have coming down the pike, Eric?
Yeah, so book two comes out September 8th, which I'm really excited about. And after that, I've got next year's going to be busy for me again. I've got my standalone novel called Brute, which is coming out from Saga Press in March. So I'm really looking forward to that. That's about a gay wedding planner who's obsessed with the art of public executions. And his life slowly starts to unravel when he's tasked to um, plan this really high-profile gay wedding. So that I'm looking forward to that. And then the third Burnt Sparrow book comes out next September. So I'm really the finishing chapter of this trilogy. So I'm really looking forward to
Is
that.
it? Have you finished it?
Yes, I have. It's with my editor now, and I'm waiting for her inevitable editorial letter. So
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. So folks, we're going to get into spoilers for book one. I know nothing about what's happened beyond book one, so I can't spoil anything for books two and three. So but as far as this is your spoiler warning. So yeah, so I gotta say the supernova part for me, or the part where the book where I really felt like you were doing something really, really interesting, was the bird. Right, the
Yeah,
bird, the
yeah,
bird. And so we'll come back to the bird in a little bit, but I want to talk about um Rupert, the death of Rupert's father is a really when he witnesses the death of his father, one of the things that was so powerful about it was just how anticlimactic it felt to Rupert. Like, here's
yeah,
this figure that he sort of loved but also tortured him, and he had really complicated feelings over, and then he's just dead. And
yeah,
wow, what a powerful scene. And what and I just really loved how it was constructed, that it wasn't built up to in a way, and it just kind of, because like I was like, oh, okay, well, that happened. And I was reading it on the bus that particular day, and I just remember, like, I kind of jokingly, I there's a Mexican lady sitting next to me on the bus, and I kind of wanted to look at her like, you have no idea what I just read. Right, this is crazy. Right. So tell me about writing that. And was that something that you knew was going to happen to Rupert's father for a long time, or was that a spur of the moment thing?
If I remember correctly, I feel like that was a spur of the moment thing. I think, the original outline of this trilogy is so dramatically different than what has
Mhm.
been published, especially in book two. It just went off the rails in a completely different direction. And I think there was an early draft, an early iteration where Rupert's father is kept alive, but like tortured, like the faceless family in the cellar. So, but then I just had that moment of discovery where I really wanted Rupert to kind of experience this loss and this um, feeling of detachment from the cruelty and the brutality on display. And I really wanted to like explore that and see how that would play out. And with his eventual removal from his own house into the Esherwoods estate, it felt like kind of a natural thing to have happen, especially in the story. But I did want it to feel anticlimactic in a way because I feel like so much violence in our society feels like that. I feel like we're calloused to it in a lot of ways. I feel like we're very detached from seeing horrible images from Gaza and other
Mhm.
horrific places where horrible atrocities are being performed against innocent people. But I feel like we're detached from it in a way. Maybe it doesn't affect all of us the way it should. And I really wanted to explore that with this book. And the violence in this book is so commonplace. It's just so it's part of the language of the text, but it's also like just very not it there are no frills to it. No, it's not operatic, it's not like theatrical, it's just like what it is.
Mhm. Yeah, and what's interesting is because I storytelling for me is all parallels and reversals. I love parallels and reversals. That's like for me. And what I really liked about the kind of parallel that we have to what you're saying, and how we're kind of subjected to all these brutal images, and doom scrolling is a thing in our world. And
Yeah.
Rupert is who's kind of forced to, like, stare upon these victims of this massacre, right? And the mystery of who the faceless killers are, creates a situation where other people are blamed, and then you know a lot of that small town politics is such great parallel for I'm sure for what your experience was growing up. And I say this as a positive, as a weirdo in a small town, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And
Yeah.
I was lucky. I grew up in a college town, so I was a weirdo, but it was a college town, so it wasn't so terrible. But I had lots of friends who moved from other places and all had that experience. So I
Mm.
think, there's so many great parallels that you were trying to build upon with like Rupert's experience. I don't know if I'm correct about that, but
No,
that's what I felt.
totally, totally. I feel like, the book Rupert's like a composite of me. He's not exactly me because no
Yeah.
character is exactly,
Yeah.
the author. There, we infuse bits of ourselves into the characters, but unless you're writing like an autobiography, it's not 100% verbatim us.
Mhm.
But I want I think the thing I love about horror is that it forces us to stare unblinkingly at the carnage and at the brutality. But there are so many people who say they like horror, but they like shy away from those like grotesque descriptions and that sort of like unflinching brutality. And it always
Mhm.
unsettles me a little bit because it's like, horror is an honest genre. It's a very it's staring at the car wreck on the highway. It's like
Yeah.
you are going to look at this, you are going to be uncomfortable. It's not safe. I mean, you're in a safe environment reading and watching, digesting horror, but horror should never feel like it's safe. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
I want it to feel forbidden.
Well, and I want to create a safe space for something here too, and that is something that Stephen Graham Jones and I talked about on this very podcast multiple times. And it's funny, and I did this in spoilers, even though this might not seem like a spoiler question. However, one of the things I love about Stephen is that he wears his influences on his sleeve. And like when we are talking about Mongrels, he specifically was like, "Oh yeah, I read every werewolf novel I could before before I wrote that." And he wasn't shy about it. And he was saying, and a lot of people will be like, "Well, I don't want to be," And he was like, "No, I want to do those things." And so, and I've had books that uh the one that was nominated for Splatter Ring of Fire. I specifically have three books that I say all the time. I wanted it to be John Bruner's The Sheep Look Up, Skip Inspector's The Bridge,
Mm,
and and Ring of Fire. I wanted my book to be in conversation with those two books.
totally.
Said it specifically. And
Yeah.
so you specifically said you wanted this book to be in conversation with McDowell's trilogy. And I waited for spoilers for this, but I'm really interested in how, and I'm saying safe space here. Like, how did you want this book to be in conversation with that one? Because I want to normalize that we should be in conversation with our favorite books. We fucking should. We
I
should,
think we should.
yeah,
Yeah, because some people I've noticed when I used to when things have gotten worse since we last spoke came out, Sam Richard from Weird Punk described it as David Cronenberg and J.G. Ballard meeting in a chat room in the late 90s, early aughts. And I was like, that's exactly what it is. You're right. Like that's what
yeah,
I want this book to be in conversation with. And so many people when that book went viral they thought it was so conceited or um so just unacceptable for us to reference those authors
no,
because
fuck
it
that.
made it boggled my mind so much because it's like I revere those people so much. Like I
Yeah,
revere David Cronenberg, I revere J.G. Ballard. I want my books to be in conversation with what they've created.
yeah.
And for like
You're not
that's
saying you're on
I'm
their
not saying I'm
level.
on their level, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying like the book is inspired by what they've created and I create that's why writers write is we
We
read
aspire
something.
to be to their level, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, reading Michael McDowell's Blackwater and just kind of savoring like the expansiveness of it and the breadth, the broadness of the story. I mean, I I have always felt very comfortable writing novellas and short stories,
Yeah.
and to write a novel of this size was really um intimidating in a lot of ways. And I really wanted to explore larger, like tome, like giant doorstopper books. Like the original plan for this trilogy was actually going to be like a massive doorstopper tome
Yeah.
with each book, like We Are Always Tender with Our Dead was part one. We Turn Gruesome at Night is part two. We Leave Behind Our Stains is part three of just one book. But we eventually decided to make it just like, release it in installments the way Blackwater was released. But I savored books like The Great and Secret Show by Clive Barker
Mhm.
and Our Share of Night by Mariana Enriquez. And I just wanted this book to feel like expansive and just sprawling and really just like in conversation with that with those talents. And I'm
Mhm.
not saying that I'm on their level or anything, but I think it's important for writers to reference other writers that have influenced them. And also, like what Stephen Graham Jones had said to you is so important too, because like you need to get the lay of the land of
Yeah.
what space you're operating in. If you're going to write
Yeah.
like a werewolf novel, you should maybe read some werewolf novels, you
Right.
know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I don't want to make this about me, so when we're done, I could tell you a funny story about that arena, but that I have, but it's interesting because I think this novel, it's funny too because I looked at a couple of reviews and I saw some people I thought were missing the boat, but whatever, and then a lot of people were getting it, but what's funny is that conversation that you're having. Me personally, I I as a person who loves the history of all these genres, I
Yeah,
love when I can feel that the book is in conversation with something else, right?
me too.
Yeah. Like Brian Evanson's The Warren, I'll use as an example, is absolutely in conversation with PKD.
Yeah.
And 100%. And like that feeling to me is really great. And then also when you happen upon these things, it's really great when I remember Brian and I talking about immobility, and we were just having a conversation about it. And I asked him one time, I was like, well, that reminded me of such and such scene from Canicle for Leibowitz. And then he just like pointed at me and he was like, yes. Right. And I was like, okay, that's an awesome feeling for a reader when you can catch on to these things. And so I see all that. I see it. I will say though, I saw the comparison to the Great and Secret Show, and I admit I didn't really see that comparison. So I'm interested where you see it because when I think of Great and Secret Show, I think of alternate universes, and I think of like sprawling travel novel in a lot of senses. But of course, I haven't read Great and Secret Show since it came out, so maybe I'm remembering it wrong. But I admit I didn't see that connection. So where does that one come from?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I could see it in like the expansiveness of the story and like the different kind of alternate realities, like that kind of thing with like
Okay,
Burnt
I see.
Sparrow.
Mhm.
That being said, like maybe it has more in line with like the Damnation game or
Mhm.
um you know I wanted to reference a book that I think the publicist at Titan really wanted like something Clive Barker, and we went with Great and Secret Show because it was that kind of like expansive,
Mhm.
sprawling, like epic novel. Um, but I mean Clive Barker's work, I feel like my work is naturally in conversation with a lot of his
All
material
the
just
time. Yeah.
because yeah, just because I have like so much reverence and respect for him and just absolutely like his writing really changed my life in a lot of ways. Like it made me feel it gave me like permission to be grotesque and vile and problematic in fiction and uh to be all of those weird, uncomfortable things that maybe are not easily digestible in polite society.
Okay. The bird. the bird.
Yeah.
Uh, definitely the part of the book where I felt like I was connecting to the weirdness of it. Like I'm getting
Yeah.
the vibe here because that bird is just so strange and but also visceral. And not in a visceral like people a lot of times will connect visceral to the violent and the bloody, but to me what was visceral about the bird was I saw it so visually, like
Mhm.
it sunk into my brain. But I also had the thought, I'm reading way too much into this bird. Or am I? Because I thought so much about the bird afterwards. And then it was funny because I was scrolling through some of the reviews and I just saw somebody said, "What the fuck with that bird?"
Yeah.
Right. And I
Yeah.
and then I laughed because I was like, "Yep, what the fuck with that bird?" But
Yeah.
the thing was is that when Rupert's holding the bird, that was the, you know, because the bird is, in my opinion, um a creature out of reality, and Rupert is trying to protect it
Yeah.
or understand it and seeing a mirror of himself, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. And that's why the moment as such an emotional
I
resonance.
will say this too, like sorry to cut you off,
No,
but
no,
like
no, no.
the bird, so much of this book is rooted in intrusive thinking and OCD,
Mm-hmm.
and so much of the brutality and so much of the weirdness. This book is like intrusive thoughts come to life, is how I really describe it. And
Mm-hmm.
Rupert imagining some like woodland creature happening upon his offering in the woods when he's like masturbating,
Yeah,
creating that thing. Um that's his intrusive thoughts like in a way like created this just dark depraved thing, and that's
yeah,
what I was really trying to like explore with that, is just like intrusive thinking like personified, you
yeah.
know.
And this bird with this weird face, and then you uh it's funny, then you forget like you forget that he was masturbating, like because then you're like you're so interested in the mystery of what this thing is, and then
Right.
and then it's like it's not even like a so what, he was in the woods master. I didn't, now I'm focused on what's going on with this
Right, I get
weird
it, I
face.
get
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Well, and yeah, it's just such an interesting, yeah. Well, and but I, in a weird way, that's where I felt like I super connected to Rupert in that moment as a reader. And so, and also as a person who's pretty straight laced and straight edge and uh pretty cis normal, like when you can connect to a character like Rupert in that moment, that's when you're doing your job as a
Oh, I
writer.
appreciate it, thank
Yeah,
you, thank
yeah.
you.
And just a really good stuff. And it's funny because one of the things that's kind of neat in horror is in the horror communities, we all kind of root for each other a little bit. And and uh I had a friend who taught a workshop at a romance writers conference, and man, they're vicious to each other, and
Heard. Yeah.
they do not work with each other. And one of the things is that I think about the horror community is a lot of times, like, we're rooting for each other and we like to see each other succeed, and things like, when I go to the Odyssey and I see another mommy trailer, I'm just so stoked for Josh, right?
Same.
Like, you
Same.
know, and one of the things about this book is that I had a moment in here when I was reading it where I was just, it's so funny because we'd only talked briefly and mostly online, but I know this sounds really weird, but I was so proud of you reading this book as a person from the community, that I followed and care about and think is a great writer. And I was just like, fuck yeah, this book is nailing it on so many levels. And then it
Oh my God,
also,
thank you so much.
I know that sounds a little weird, but
It's beautiful. I appreciate that so much. That's so lovely of you.
well, and I get this all the time with you know, it works in the reverse too. Like when the knock in the cabin thing was happening, I was angry for Paul, right?
Yeah,
I was angry for Paul that that his role in writing that book was minimized, right?
yeah,
And I was, and it's funny too because he would say to me like, "Oh, you don't have any reason to be angry for me. I'm not angry," but or I'm like, okay, you're giving me a good public face here, but what I'm saying
yeah.
is that I just love in horror how much we care for each other's work and feel that way, and I really felt amazing reading this book. And so that's one of the reasons why I reached out to you literally about 10 minutes after I finished reading it. So,
Thank you so much. This was such a pleasure, and I really cannot thank you enough for having me on your show.
okay, well, yeah, and that's great. And uh, speaking of selling my telescope, is I was at a star party when I finished reading this. I was about to go take pictures of the universe when I finished reading this.
Love
So
that. Love it.
it was great. So and I don't want to take too much more of your time here, but I'm really looking forward to the other books in the series. I got to catch up to more of your work along the way. I admit it, I've been more in sci-fi land, and so it was really nice to Mark, the guy that I do best reads of the year podcast with at the end of the year, always yelling at me for not reading enough horror every year, and so I think he'll be pretty stoked that this makes my top 10.
Oh
So
man, thank you so much.
yeah, I just really love it. So all right, folks. Uh Eric already kind of already told you what to look for, but if you made it this far, definitely follow Eric online and follow the work. I'm sure this will probably not be our last conversation. I'm leaning towards in the future this podcast doing lots of panels like it's a convention. And so look forward to everyone for more types of panels. And I'm sure I will find reasons to invite Eric.
I would love that. I'm down.
Yeah.
I'm down.
All right, folks. So this is episode 197. I'm not sure what 198 and 199 will be. Anthony Trevino and Issa Dio and we've been joking about doing a unproduced screenplay show about the Hans and Franz script that Conan O'Brien wrote that never got made. We we've always done like John Carpenter movies and like all this stuff, and I was thinking, you gotta do something else.
Yeah.
But yeah, so folks, 200 is coming up, the Amazing Stories episode. So please keep an eye out for that. Cody Goodfellow, Jonathan Mayberry, Philip Frakazi, Jack Gem, and Christina Griffant are all on that episode as a panel recorded live at Verbatim Books here in San Diego. And hopefully see you at the Philip K. Dick Festival. Thank you, Eric, for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right.